usually use SLAs as proof of business values. I mean, they are not designed for that, but they are no longer sufficient. Everybody's talking about KPI, but nobody talks about KBI. And that's probably what is missing there. That's where the disconnect is.
All right, welcome back, folks, to Beyond the IT Headlines. For today, I want to start with a scenario every IT leader recognizes. The dashboard is green. The SLA was met. The provider technically performed, but the business is still unhappy because a workflow stalled. A customer experience degraded or a revenue process was impacted. Feels like the core tension between SLAs and XLAs, technical performance versus business outcome. Put another way, SLAs tell you whether the provider performed. They don't always tell you whether the business succeeded. And in the AI era, that gap's going to become even harder to ignore. A service can be available, a model can respond, a platform can be running, but if users don't trust the result, if teams are doing more manual rework, or if a business process breaks down, did the business really succeed? I don't think so. That's what I think of as the watermelon SLA. Green dashboards, red outcomes. With that, it's my absolute pleasure today to unpack this. And for that, I am joined by Paul Newman, Head of Go-to-Market Services at IT Services Demystified. Paul spent his career at the intersection of service delivery, commercial strategy, contract structure, and customer value. And that makes him a perfect guest for today's conversation because we're talking about what happens when the SLA is met, the dashboard is green, but the business feels like it failed. Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks for inviting me. Maybe I'm going to introduce myself. So, as you said, I'm Paul Newman, founder of IT Services Demystified. And before that, I spent more than 2 decades at HP. I've since written 2 books, one on IT services contracts, and another one that just been released on AI governance. So, and I created the contractual value architecture, or CVA. That is basically a framework that helps organizations align the commercial promises, the contract, governance, delivery, reality, and measurable business outcomes. So basically trying to avoid that watermelon dashboard.
Let's kind of start right at the heart of this. When the SLA's met, but the customer still feels they didn't get what they needed, what does that usually spell about the agreement? What does your experience tell you?
I mean, that's usually a very, very clear sign of misalignment. Misalignment between the promises and the reality of the field. There's SLAs that are very nice. I mean, SLAs are basically technical measures, but it says absolutely nothing about the outcomes, about the business impact, about how the commerciality is complete or incomplete. So indeed, metric can be passed and the outcome being failed. That's a fact.
So let's jump into that. So I don't want this to become one of those simplistic SLAs are dead and nobody should be looking at them. It sounds to me like we're talking about a misalignment between what the SLA is delivering and what the business actually needs. In fact, maybe we're not using SLAs for what they were designed to do. They're kind of intended to be the operational floor, not the business finish line. So kind of what are you seeing in your experience as everybody goes to this as a service consumption, as people start to look at these SLAs as a way to mitigate risk and guarantee service? What are SLAs doing well, and where are they starting to break down? Where's the real tension points?
So you're perfectly right in the sense that, first of all, SLAs are not dead. That remains. That's not a concept. That's not a buzzword. That's really a need to measure how well the delivery is taking place, how well the accountability is being handled by a supplier. It helps with response time, escalation paths, operational baselines, and so on and so forth. But the problem is that we usually use SLAs as proof of business values. I mean, they are not designed for that. So SLAs are necessary, but they are no longer sufficient. SLA is a measure. That's a key performance indicator. That's absolutely not. And I've never seen a key business indicator, for example. Maybe that's something that should be introduced at some point in time. Everybody's talking about KPI, but nobody talks about KBI. And that's probably what is missing there. That's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, that's a real interesting one. So let's just try to make this real. I mean, if you looked at the cloud, and let's just use public cloud as an example here, what's an example of a technical SLA that looks really good on paper? But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not really protecting customers' businesses.
But the cloud by definition is available 100% of the time. Or we had a recent example with failures from AWS or Cloudflare, who nearly put the internet on the knees, as we say in French. But I mean, usually cloud is always available. Now, being always available doesn't mean that, for example, if you host a business application on the cloud, you will get something that is always available as well. So you need to disconnect and make the difference between the carriage, which is the cloud, and the business, which is the application itself. So as a supplier, you take any hyperscaler, they can guarantee you a 100% availability, or let's say 99.99999. But that doesn't mean that your business is going to be running smoothly without any hiccups. My website, I can talk about my website. I had a failure on my assessment application recently, and my customers were not able to run their assessment. But still, internet and the website were working. So that's where the difference really is important, making the distinction between the SLA and the XLA, which is the next level. This is where the user is really having the sentiment about the quality of the service being delivered.
So, Paul, I mean, this ultimately brings us to some of your thesis and theses, which really talks to XLAs and, you know, really expanding what we've traditionally looked at within SLAs. So when we say X, we're talking about experience level agreements, and they can sound soft if they're framed as sentiment or satisfaction. But I think the stronger version is this. SLAs tell you whether the provider met the technical promise. XLAs tell you whether the service mattered to the business. So I don't know, Paul, help us understand a little bit more about this XLA concept. Where's your head at, and what are you feeling in this space?
Yeah, so Sean, XLAs are being introduced initially in replacement for the or to get an internal view, so to speak, about the Net Promoter Score. NPS is for external audience. XLAs is really for the IT to understand how the internal users are feeling the service. A useful XLA at the end of the day is to be tied to a real workflow, not just a feeling. That helps to measure the sentiment, but it has to be really tied to something concrete. It must trigger governance action when it goes red. It must also triggers potentially some investigation when it becomes yellow. If you cannot act on an XLA, that's not an XLA. What you're doing is a survey. That's different.
Yeah, it has to be feasible. So just to bring our audience along, what are some examples of practical XLAs that you've seen that are actually tied to business value? What do these look like?
So let's take the example of Amazon. Everybody knows Amazon. The XLA on Amazon is I'm the user. I want to purchase a book. Am I able to go through in how long? If for whatever reason I see the clock ticking, the cycle running, and so on and so forth, there's a problem. So the XLA is really there to measure the possibility to run the business and to end properly in a timely and hopefully securely fashion.
I like your example. I'd even take it one step further, Paul. The XLA should actually take it to the book is now in my hands. I've gone from wanting the book to the book is now physically in my possession, or if it's an ebook, it's on my reader. And that is way more exhaustive than is the site open and can I log in? I think we're really kind of stretching what the capability is here. And I guess my question back to you is, you talked about this being an internal metric,
Mm-hmm.
but let's just clarify that. I mean, is the goal here to replace SLAs with XLAs, or to connect technical accountability to business impact? How does this actually change the way vendors and consumers are going to interact in the marketplace?
The SLA provide the technical accountability. I'm an hyperscaler, I'm AWS, I'm Google, I'm whoever you want. I'm going to provide you the availability of the cloud. That's going to be an SLA. Now, I'm Amazon, not AWS, but I'm Amazon now. I'm going to provide you with the XLA, which is your clients can go through my service to purchase your goods and get them delivered. Now, I just want to make a small parenthesis compared to what you said before. You took the example of the end-to-end, which is absolutely perfect because that's the experience of the client from the time he placed the order to the time he get the book in his hands. I just want to make a little correction there, not in the sense that it's end-to-end. That's correct. The problem is that if you start measuring things which are too long, and there you are having multiple suppliers, that's where you might end up being confused because you might have something which is red, even though some slices are green. And that's also the problem with all dashboards as a whole. There are some people who are looking at silos. So let's say for the book, I'm the one who is printing the book. I'm green because I was able to print, to receive the order, print the book, ship it. Fine. Then I'm the one who is shipping or the transporting the book. I might be green because I started at time T and time day plus one, I was able to deliver. But if you look end to end, that's where you might have, and that's, I think, the perfect example of the watermelon dashboard. It might be red, and the user experience, which is not measured by SLAs but by NPS, so Net Promoter Scores, for example, is going to be red, is going to be negative. So making a long story short, at the end of the day, the goal is not to replace SLAs with XLAs, but it's really to connect both because both have their own use and their own usage.
Yeah, I love the way you put it. I mean, this is really where your perspective is so especially valuable, right? A lot of people can say we measure outcomes, but fewer people can say or explain how those outcomes should be integrated into the contract, the pricing model, the commercial relationship. Really, how are they mitigating risk by this contract? When you look at this contractual process, this commercial core, what are you advising clients to look at as they're getting into these agreements? And how do they take what we talked about today and really build it towards a better contract and a more balanced working relationship?
The contract is a great tool and a great threat at the same time. The contract is, in my opinion, the tool that enables to align the expectation from the client with the capability from the supplier. That's the partnership Bible, let me call it that way. That's really what's linked the expectations with the commitments. And that's also, I mean, that reflection is what led me to write my first book, but that's also what led me to put together the contractual value architecture, which is a framework that I'm using with my clients to explain them how a strong contract can still fail in execution. So even having a very strong contract, a very clear RACI, so who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, who is informed, all those activities, swim lane, everybody who is knowledgeable with ITIL will know exactly what I'm talking about with when I'm saying swim lanes, for example, but where all the processes are clearly defined. But processes is one thing, but you need also to be prepared for if things go south. If, for example, something goes wrong, what should I do? I mean, you cannot imagine the number of contracts or the number of customers that I've been working with who told me, guys, I've been working with that supplier, and then I had an escalation, and I didn't know how to handle it. Yeah. Why? Because it was not in contract.
Yeah, I love what you just said, because what it feels like is, and tell me if I got this right, is when I'm sitting down with my provider and they're talking about their SLAs, I have full understanding and acknowledgement that those are the contractual SLAs. But part of that review should also be the XLA that says I should then be able to come back with my review that says, in addition to the SLAs, this is how the business did in receiving the value that was conveyed. Were we able to actually drive our project forward? And it's not about laying fault. It's about having the vendor understand that you may think everything is great, but fundamentally, I haven't reached the outcome of my original business case. I am not actually reaching the perceived value that underpinned the original deal. And therefore, we have a discussion to talk about, which is, now that we know what's actually being delivered, does the deal stand on its own, or is the financial business case actually no longer relevant?
Running a contract on free will, I would define it, is that's the best way to reach failure. There's so many times that I've seen contract being signed, and then supplier and customer never discussing about where they stand on the delivery. That's one thing, but where the customer stands on its business. That's exactly where the QBRs, so the quarterly business reviews, are there for, because that's where you reconciliate the view of the supplier with the experience of the customer, and that's where you can realign. If the supplier should ask, where we good in helping you achieving your goals, and the client is there to say, okay, I've got new business, I've got new needs. How can we work together so that my future needs can be met as well? So that's the adaptation of the delivery, the expectation, the past, the present, the future. That's all the three dimensions that you bring into those QBRs. The contract is a partnership Bible, nothing else.
Yeah, well, folks, you heard it here first, right? I mean, SLAs tell you whether the provider met the technical promise, the contractual commitment. But what we learned today from Paul was that the XLA, the experience level agreement, tells us whether the service actually mattered to the business, whether the customer got the value out of the project underpinned by the service that was actually taken forward. And I love, Paul, what you just said. I mean, this is absolutely a two-way street, and every QBR or every business review or quarterly interlock should be a match of both what did we contractually commit, and is that green, but what did the business commit to its stakeholders, and was that green? And having a full understanding and a full, essentially, accountability. I love how you brought Racy into this, a full accountability on both sides to working towards that business outcome. Sounds like it's the crux of what we discussed today. Did I get that right?
Yep, absolutely. Out of the close to 200 contracts that I've signed, I think the most successful ones were really the ones where I was able to sit with my account execs in front of the customer, in front of the C-level, in front of the IT, and say, okay, guys, what did we did right? Where did we fail? And having that open and honest conversation really help both sides improve, make things better, run more smoothly, and at the end of the day, of course, make the business achieve their goals more easily.
Well, thank you for building that so well into our close here of the partnership and the way we evaluate SLAs and XLAs. Paul, thank you so much for being part of this today. I know that you've also explained this topic not only in the books that you mentioned, but also on the datawire.com. So I'll ask users to go there to kind of see this in a little bit more detail. As always, folks, appreciate if you like and subscribe to our podcast, both available on YouTube and Spotify. With that, for Sean Rosemarin and Paul Newman, we are Beyond the IT Headlines, and we'll see you again soon.